Hello and welcome to this week's live stream. We're on to race 5, the final race of this season's dirt racing series. We're on triple loops in London. Before we get started, we're going to be following the lower B category, so it's just called Cat B this time. And we'll go over the specifics of that category, but just going to take a look at last week's results to begin with, just so you have a better idea of where we stand. I'll put them on your screen for you now. Okay. So we had WMZ Bouncers taking first, Dirty Replacements in second, bit of a gap there, and quite a significant gap to the rest of the division with Talk Dirty, another 58 even, 48 even seconds behind, HGR and Aerogard coming in 4th and 5th, so in the actual lead they're the opposite way round, so that's a nice little turnaround for HDR, closing the gap on Aero, then Dirty Work, Dirty Prime, WMZ's second team, Dirt Dancers, and Zedson Goose. So we'll just take a look at the actual current team classification. Hopefully you can see WMC Bouncers are quite clearly ahead of the 4 races so far. They've won 3 out of the 4. Not sure which one they came second on, but they have a comfortable lead going into the final race, so they should be very comfortable taking first overall. But where it becomes interesting is for the rest of the podiums. We've got 3 points separating second through to 4th. It'll be interesting who can nab those second and third spots. It'll come down to today. You have Dirty Replacements in second, Talk Dirty in third, and then Aero chasing them down in 4th. HGR closed the gap a little bit last week, but sat in 5th. And behind them, Dirty Prime and Dirty Work. Also there with 3 points generally being the gap between most of the rest of the division. So we'll see how we go on today. With it being the final week, there's a bit of play onto rider classification. So individually, first place we have WMZ Bouncers, so first place for the team and first place for the individual, Stephen Mulligan, but close behind is HDR Buccaneers Andrew Bain, only 9 points in it, so either one of them could easily take the win today. Then in third again it's close for that final place with Ricky Yuan, for Dirt Prime, Jordan Graddon from Aero and Tyler Navin from Dirty Replacements, all being quite close. But again, this is very much focused on team event. Obviously there's individual points, but I think most people will happily put their individual success second, going first. We also have 2 other categories. You have specialists for climbing and for sprints. So in the climbing category we've got Brian Leal from WMZ Bouncers and Stephen Mulligan. So it'll be interesting to see how they do. Brian Leal's got a huge head start here, but we have double points on the KOM today, and this is really the main kind of climbing efforts. So we're going to see how that turns around. And Dirt Prime again close behind another HGR. So it's very similar. Obviously, if you look back at the ride classification, a lot of those points are coming at the finish. See, 51.72, 244. So it's really, the finish really adds up for your overall points. But the difference between those further down is that they haven't got many segment points, and they're just wholly relying on the finish points as soon as you get outside the top 2 or 3 places. In terms of the sprints, we've got Michael Dodd from Talk Dirty, currently in first, HDR, Andrew Bain, WMZ Bouncers, Stephen Mulligan, all close and competing for those top 3 spots. So we'll see how we get on with that. We'll just have a quick look at the course. So we've got a few minutes left before the race starts. So on the course itself, you see we've got a very flat, gentle intro. The first lead-in's a bit up and down, but generally it's quite flat, and most riders should be comfortable. And we have a downhill sprint on the mall, which will be important for those sprint points, especially for those guys competing for the individual. And the most important thing is going to be the Leith Hill climb. We have a tough intro, might drop a couple of riders, but generally there's a lot of rest in there. It's the first 5 minutes are particularly steep, as you can see. Then it flattens out a bit, it flattens out more than it looks here. And then the last bit of the climb is absolutely brutal. A tough, probably 8-minute effort, I'd guess, for these guys up there. And that's worth double points. That's going to be absolutely massive for the finish. And then we also go over Box Hill just to make it fun for the riders. Could lose a lot of rides on the downhill today as well, so something to watch out for. But yeah, the Box Hill will be the real breakaway for the finish if people want to go for it. And then the finish at 40.9 kilometres. So we'll get back to the racing, see how long we have. Again, sorry that the time's got a bit stuck. Yep, we've got 10 seconds, so plenty of time. Let's see how we set off. Lead-in's a bit brutal, but generally most good and top riders here should be able to keep up with it. I wouldn't expect to see anyone drop through it. So again, while it says C on the right hand side, these are B- riders. When we get into some of the flat sections, I'll show you a bit more about the scoring for those who haven't been watching for previous weeks. I'll take a look at the rest, including things like the categorization. Generally, this is just for lower beasts, so I think the limit is around 3.6. I think it's 3.2 to 3.6, if I remember correctly, in terms of your average 95% of 20 minute, which is meant to be a proxy for your FTP. Let's see people just pushing out a little bit, and they're settling in early, which is nice to see. We don't like too many races where people are pushing out 5, 6 for a good minute off the start. Not a big fan. I understand why people do it. It helps drop the occasional rider who's not paying attention, catch riders out. But to me, those riders who are going to get dropped at the start are going to get dropped anyway. You might as well let them ride together, have a nice group for a bit, and make it more enjoyable for people. We want Zwift to take off and do well. We don't want people to have one go on the kind of platform, get dropped in the first race right at the start and never come back again. As you see, we just have a couple of ups and downs here, kind of rolling to begin with as we come through. See, the group's quite tight, packed together. A couple of people pushing off the front, but usually that's a bit accidental. Not many people are purposefully trying to attack through this section. Might push the pace, but actually jumping off the front isn't really beneficial in pushing the pace. If you're wanting to increase the pace, you want to stay latched on at the front and just ease it up. So just for some kits, just for reference, we've got quite a lot of dirt teams here. And then this WMZ we'll be looking out for. I think WMZ are in this yellow and orange kit, split 50-50. And they also have a Bumblebee kit, which is the yellow and black. So they're both chevrons across. One is the yellow and orange, one is the yellow and black. Both have black lines across. In terms of dirt, Talk Dirty, which is currently third in the league, are in this, I'll zoom in, but it's the kit with 15 blue, 15 on the back. That's your Talk Dirty kit. And the dirty replacements, I'm not sure the name of the kit, but it's the one with the yellow, it's the blue kit with the yellow kind of shapes with a Z in the middle of them. Should really learn the names of some of these standard kits. Then we have Seb for the Dirty Dancers, who's jumping on. He's one of the quite lead ZwiftDS, probably team manager for Beast Mode. So he's going to be jumping on. He's currently, I believe, a C rider, but trying to push up. You can just see him sat in the back in his Beast Mode kit for Dirty Dancers. And the green Tron. It's interesting to see a lot of green Trons today. A lot of Trons today, in a variety of colours. So because there is an important climb worth double the points, you're going to see a bit more variety. I'd like to see a few more people going for a more climbing setup. But again, it's not really in your benefit long run if you are just going to target those points, which for a couple of riders it might be beneficial. Then you will want to go for a lighter setup. But I think one of the main things is if you're going to be strong enough to go for those points towards the top of the category, then you're going to be looking to get some good finish points as well, at which point the downhill matters and the flats matter, because you want to be as fresh as possible, shall we say, going into it. Whereas if you're on a lightweight bike, you might be doing a little bit more work. Generally it's not that significant, but a little bit more work does start to add up. And so the savings you can make from being on an in-between bike and all round like the Tron will help. Again, the Tron is a good climber. You've seen a couple of riders. I can spot one from Zsunner on a disc wheel. That will help them for the sprint over the Tron. It'll get you, probably 0.1, 0.2 of a second on the sprint itself. But realistically, that's not going to make the world of difference. And given how deep the points go, if you think you're going to be right at the front or doing well on most of the kind of segments, then you're probably going to be in an advantage to go a bit lighter than that. Something like the Tron or an Air Road 2021, and without the disc wheels. So the first segment we have up is the sprint, and generally in this lower B category we do have a lot of good sprinters. So one of the things you notice is in terms of pure watts, that tends to be where the sprinters in Cat B and C tend to do really, really well. As soon as you get up into A, a lot of the rides are a bit lighter, so while they have strong sprints, they don't quite have that pure wattage. And for FTS, and especially for longer, flatter sprints, especially if the group starts early, that's what really matters. It's going to be those pure watts. In terms of the numbers, we have John Emerson from Aero Guard, who are currently sat in 4th overall, with a 1,150 watt, 15 seconds. So the sprint will definitely favour him if he's going to go for it. Then we have Tyler Navin, Dodd, and Jimbo Vinny from a variety of dirt teams. I think Tyler's from Dirty Replacement, Dodd's from Talk Dirty, and Jimbo Vinny's from Dirt to Prime, but all over 1,000 watts. So as we come up here, we've just got a little climb. Might do a little bit of damage. Sees WMZ pushing off the front here. It's not necessarily going to cause any major issues. We've got BMAC. And yeah, straight away Arava responded. AHDR even. Just go a bit close, see what kind of numbers they're pushing. Lots of people do generally attack here, and it helps kind of get the pack a bit more agitated, especially going to a flatter section. But on this one, I think we're turning left and then down to a downhill. Oh no, we are, ignore me. We are going where I thought, okay. So it's straight across into a little, there is another climb, so it is an okay section to attack on. But realistically, with the size of the group, you're unlikely to fully break away. It's just going to do a bit of damage to people at the back and drop them away. See, Dodd's stuck in a bit of no man's land here. He really needs to push across aggressively. It's much better to be in the draft for a bit longer than to kind of get caught in halfway and just have to chill off. Or essentially just sit there doing a bit more than you need to, doing the same as the person behind and same as the person, the leader of the front group. So he's just dropped onto nothing here. It's a bit odd. Hopefully he's not had a dropout here. His RPMs have gone down. It's a bit concerning. That's going to be very bad for the Talking Dirty team if Dodd's had a dropout here. One of their top riders. It looks like he is out, so let's hope they have more than 4 riders in the team. So there's no way that he's going to get any other points here. It's not like we have a loop around, it's a straight course. We're just going from A to B essentially. It is a bit of a loop around London, but we don't kind of come back on ourselves at any point. And so sadly he's not going to be able to sit in and get the benefit of the draft from these segments. It's truly probably going to be race over for him aside from some finish points. It's really sad to see. If you look on the minimap, you can see the group is very stretched out here. We've got a little climb into the section, then a kind of extended small downhill. So those riders towards the bottom are really going to be suffering. Surprised to see it break up quite so much here. But, you know, there is a significant gap here between some of the riders further back. Not sure if I saw that was Dodd yet. Dodd's back on, so thankfully whatever dropout he had, he's managed to get it back together. And he's doing exactly as he should, really pushing hard here. He needs to really bridge across this Zedson guy if he can, because that group ahead is so big. See, 47, so there's about 45 riders in that front group. There's no way he's going to catch up solo on this downhill. He needs to get a bit of more of a group together. Especially if we can sit on Stu from Zedson as wheel. It'll help him for a bit. There's no point in him working too hard on this downhill. So he's just carrying on around 3 watts per kilo. He kind of needs to chill a little bit more. I know the group's got 8 seconds on him now. It's unlikely he's going to be able to make that back. And he certainly won't do it on this downhill. We've got a little group behind, say about 6 riders. So the real better move for him would just be sit up, get with these, and then try and jump across as soon as we hit a climb. He's going to hurt himself doing that, but you know, it's the best way. He's going to have the most benefit from going with that rather than just wasting himself on the flats and not making a ton of ground. So he's down another second already. All these downhills are really going to hurt, and that's why those attacks, while not beneficial for yourself, do help drop other riders. Sadly, Dodd had a dropout which caused it, but it's one of those things. So Pete Cannon, sorry, apologies, don't know how to quite pronounce that. I'm not sure if he's dropping back to try and help out Dodd, to help bring him back. Be a very kind of bold move for them. But it looks like he has dropped back off the group, whether he's struggling or to help out his teammate. Yeah, there's 2 of their own team back, so I wonder if they might or still have 4 in the front group. It looks like they have at least 3. Yeah, they have 4 rides in the front group, so that might be a kind of a call as a team to do that. And the more you drop back, the more other teams might notice and try and push the pace at the front. Can't see any of their main opposition, so the likes of Dirty Replacements, Aero, Guard, and HDR at the front really pushing. You see some more of the Dirty Work guys pushing a little bit at the front. But you'd like think if you'd noticed 2 of your opposition's riders have dropped back, you'd get a couple of your rides at the front to do some work and encourage the group to just go a little bit quicker. So you look in the backwards view, you can't even see them off the back, so that time gap has really added up. It does look like Dodd will now have joined, and Peter will have joined the group behind, which is quite important. If you want to chase down a big group, you need to be in a group yourself. So what's nice about having this kind of secondary division is it allows Cs who have just moved up to still race competitively. At the moment there is a very large gap. For those who have seen a bit of C racing and B racing, notice that the speeds are vastly different. While you might be able to hold on as a C and a B race, as soon as we hit a segment it's game over, because the speeds that they go up climbs are just so much quicker. Similarly with A, but when we start to get into A territory, the kind of jump gap between A and B is a bit slimmer, especially for the top end of B. As when we start to get onto climbs, especially those that aren't quite as brutally steep, there's still a lot of draft available. You'll see them going up the volcano at over 30 kilometers an hour, and at that point, you know, you still have to be close to them in terms of watts per kilo, but because you're in the draft and there's some significant savings, you can do a bit less and get away with it. Whereas when you're going from B to C, and especially C to D, once you're on those climbs, there's so little draft, even for kind of small 4-5% rises, it means that you just can't hang on. So while on the flats, when the pace is a bit low, there's plenty of draft you can keep with the group. As soon as you hit the climb, it's game over. So it's kind of nice having these smaller breakdowns of categories, especially at the lower end, which means that the riders can be more competitive and can, well, have some kind of motivation to move up because they can still race. Because a lot of people get stuck and they're like, oh, you know, I raced up for a few months, lost every single race, dropped out the front group straight away. And it isn't motivating, it doesn't encourage you to really push. And so having smaller category boundaries does help with that. And as you can see, we've got plenty of riders in this 63, so it's not like by splitting the categories we're all of a sudden just having tiny races that aren't interesting to anyone. So no, it does look fairly held together. I think that gap to the groups opened up a lot. Yep, 22 seconds, so there's no way they're coming back. They might be able to be a bit competitive through the sprint. Now they have a lead out. But aside from that, there's not going to be much that Dodd, etc. can do to get points for their team. What is interesting though, it's the top 4 point scorers. So if you have, as we saw, I was trying to call out earlier, but we're talking dirty, they have, let's say, at least 6, maybe 7 riders entered, and the top 4 point scorers go. So when they lose riders, it's not the end of the world. They still have riders in the front group who can do well. It's not all or nothing, and it kind of means things when real life takes over, when you can't turn up for something, got kids to look after, someone wakes up in the night, or you have a dropout like we saw with Dodd, it's not the end of the race for your team. It's not as brutal. And that's something that's very hard at this level when you have other commitments. You know, you're not professional riders, especially riding in these lower categories. It isn't everything to you. And it's very sad if you then have a real life situation and feel like you're letting the team down. So this setup helps minimise that a bit more. So yeah. Just while we're here, we've got a little bit to go before the sprint, so I'll just show you some of the scoring structure and have a little bit of the course. Okay, so just a quick look at the course. Showed it to you earlier, just a reminder that the Leith Hill double points for that one, and the sprint's around 14.2 kilometres. It's going to be worth a bit, especially for those chase groups who might have a chance on it. Okay, so here's the point structure. So we're racing in B, so it's 3.2 to 3.59, 95% of your 20-minute power. And then there are some exceptions for lighter rides, which you might see doing particularly well on the climb today, especially with it being a bit longer, around a 7-8 minute effort, and with a lead-in that's at least 10 minutes beforehand. And then we'll just go down to the points. So we've said it a few weeks before, but you can see there's a lot of drop down on the points. Fast through segment, first across the line, it goes down to 5 points on first across the line, and 5 points fast through segment rather than nothing, or 1 point for 10th. So there's a real benefit to coming to that top 10. Remember, this week they're going to be doubled, so fastest 2 segments are going to be worth 40 points, which is absolutely massive. That's really going to be an impact, especially over the finish. And even more so as those riders who stay away through the segment are likely to get good finish points as well. So Leith Hill is the real kind of important feature of this course, and it should be all in for most people up it. can't quite seem to get a small cut out of the course. But one thing that I'd note that's really important about this Leith Hill climb, as earlier as I talked about, there's a lot of kind of draftable sections in the lead up to it, and even for the first minute or so of the climb, the segment part of the climb. What's important is towards the last couple of minutes, for these lower B rides, it might be the last minute and a half, we go through a little kind of S-bend, and the gradient really steepens up. I think it's around maybe up to 12-15% on part of it. And that's where I'd like to see people starting to attack from. Because it's kind of a consistent, tough climb, you're going to make more of a gap by going for a longer, consistent effort, and it isn't very draftable. So while, you know, to a point you could just try and sprint at the finish, and if you really back your sprint effort, your watts per kilo sprint effort, and maybe that's the optimal kind of move for you, just sit in, conserve as much as possible, and then sprint through for the line. But for those riders who don't have necessarily quite as much sprint effort, especially for the lighter weight climbers, they'll want to try and put in a really big 1 minute effort from that bend, use a higher percentage kind of gradient and higher steeper section to get a gap quickly and break up the group, and then start to really push on and keep working all the way through to the line. It'll also be important because if you're one of those top riders and you can break the group up, doing a longer effort while, you know, people might come through you and just burst you through the line, it almost guarantees that you're going to be in that front group, especially coming into the downhill and then into the finish. Whereas if you just kind of sprint through at the end, you're not going to lose many other riders. And sprints generally, well, I think every hard effort leaves you a bit blown up. But a sprint might leave you really blown up for the finish. So you want the WMZ riders attacking. Bit of a strange place to push through and do it. But, you know, maybe they're going very, very early. So it's A Snow from WMZ. I presume that's the WMZ bouncers. I'm not actually 100% sure on which kit's which, but I'm pretty sure it is. We'll see if we can just check. So, yep, that's the kit for the WMZ bouncers. So a couple of people are starting chasing down. He's settled down to 4 watts per kilo. So we've got this little kind of steeper incline here where people might attack early for the sprint. Then we do a little loop round to the right and then turn back on ourselves and come through the sprint segment. So it's a bit strange to attack this early on unless he thinks he can totally hold the gap. You'd like to think most people will punch through the group on this steep section and then use that to break away, but I think people are expecting it. So Snow's gone a bit early to try and catch the group out. So it's not quite working. We've got people like Seb from Dirty Dancers and Atomic from the HDR Buccaneers, who have both jumped across quite early and now just coming through Snow. One of the perks of going a bit earlier for Snow, it means he's got a bit of time to recover. If we can just jump on the power, but you saw him briefly doing 4.4 just behind. And if we can jump on the power a little bit, then he should be quite comfortable. It's a bit strange to see Robbie Hacker here. He's a renowned top-end B, but maybe he's had some time off and is back down to lower Bs. It's sad to see if he's just had time off and not tested and jumped straight into this, but who knows. But yeah, so you call a lot of WMZ riders ride at the front. Ideally, you want to be sitting in a bit more through the section. The group is quite together. See, it's very wide just where we're looking at the front, which means it's generally going to be quite tight and pushed up. There's not many people just dangling off the back. I think we lost Nagel from Dirt Prime. But other than that, everyone's fairly together. It's 50-second back to the chase group. The chase group might be able to do a little bit through the sprint, but generally it's going to come from this top group, especially if we have early lead-outs, first across the line points through the sprint. It is a longer downhill sprint, so you'd like to see riders going a bit earlier than normal. On uphill sprints, you want to leave it a bit later, because there's not much benefit to building the speed on the downhill. Once you've built that speed, you're going to maintain it, so you want to see riders going about 10 seconds before the start of the segment for FTS, if they really want to fly through. But yeah, a lot of it depends on the general group speeds, how stretched out it is, if anyone's gone early. Because if you go too early like that and the group isn't stretched out at all, you're just going to fly through the front, hit the draft, and others will come through you. Hit the draft, hit the clean air, shall we say, at the front. See a couple of riders pushing the pace up. We've got Robbie Hacker on the HDR Buccaneers, just working it. It's just stretching out the group. They're not going to get away here. They're not suddenly going to break away, get first across the line. There's loads of people sensibly just sitting on their wheel. You see Mac from WMZ and a couple of the WMZ riders seem to be going together now, so they're going for an early group attack. Very strong effort. All up to 7-8 watts per kilo. We've got Atomic from the Buccaneers who's caught this. A couple of guys from Aero. And Mac Attack from Dirt, so we'll see. They've gone a bit early, and I think be interesting. They're going to get plenty of points if they can carry on and pack out the top 10, but that attack was just a little bit too early. On the downsides, they're now burnt out. You see him doing 3 watts per kilo or so. It's before the segments. They're not going to get FTS. We've got Jimbo on top riders who's coming through hard. He's going to take FTS most likely. He's timed it absolutely perfectly in the draft the entire way. And Mulligan from Bouncers just managing to hold on and do well there. Be it up. Jimbo caned up second then, it appears. So he timed it very, very well, but just got pipped out by, I believe, Miller from Eat Dirt with a 9.91, Jimbo 9.96. And then Fremont with 10.16, Tim Busick came 10.2. So plenty of points there for dirty replacements and talking dirty. Decent points well for Aero Guard just coming through. A couple of their riders towards the front, same with HDR. WMZ had 1 rider up there, but their early attack kind of really fell short. Did really well, nicely pushing out, but they just timed it a bit too early. They didn't have the power or the kind of 1 minute effort to stay away. At that point you need to be doing a full 1 minute effort, but they dropped off early just before the segment, which meant they were absolutely nerfed for FTS and they couldn't come through for foul. Riders had managed to get hold of their wheel and just sit in, doing maybe 5-6 watts per kilo, which essentially built up their speed for them and let them fly through the front. So very poorly timed move from WMZ, but great to see them trying it, doing something a bit more interesting and mixing it up. And see, obviously with a big sprint and the early attack, we have lost quite a few riders. There was a bit of a chase group, but it's going to be a bit too far away. We'll see if Snow, who'd done a lot of the early work, might be able to jump on here. Seems a strong rider. One thing to note on this corner, as you see the speeds, we're going into it about 38, but as we come around we drop down to 32, 33 kilometers now, so that's an enforced braking. It's the only place that you have enforced braking on Zwift, and weirdly enough it doesn't happen in the other direction. So coming the other way around that bend, you don't have this enforced braking, but just as you come out, it's about 2 seconds after you get out that bend, you can then accelerate back up. So those clever riders who really want to make savings will just ease off the power totally round the corner. You know, it's maybe 2 seconds you can ease off the power, and then they'll push hard towards the end. It's more noticeable in team time trials if you do it as a group. But again, there's a little bit of saving to be had there. It'll be interesting if Zwift starts to do this generally, how riders treat it. It'll make things a bit more like a crit effort, so you ease off into the corners and then accelerate hard out of them. But currently that's the only place in Zwift that I'm aware of where you do have the enforced braking. So in terms of the sprint standings, they haven't quite come through yet, but I think it'll still be close between Mulligan and Andrew Bain at the top of them. Dodd did quite well, but I didn't see him picking up a ton of points from what I saw from the second group, so I'm not sure he'll have managed to come through and take enough to get through and maintain his place at the top of the sprint points thanks to that dropout. Jimbo, who was, I believe, in 6th in the sprint standings, got a ton of points there, so might be able to come through. I think it'll be a bit of a reach. He's 23 points behind the podium going into this, so I think it'll be quite a big jump for him to have made it all the way across, getting only 2nd FTS. But he'll have moved up the order certainly in the sprint individual standings. As we come through this section, obviously we've got lots of tired rides, especially those who went hard for the sprint, but even those chasing up will have done a lot of work. So everyone's just going to settle down. You can see the pace has gone down significantly. Earlier we were holding around 43 on the flats. Now we're closer to 39-ish, 38. We just have a little bit of flatter section, then the bridge over the river, down, and then it's a lot of climbing. There are intermittent parts where you're not, but generally it's a tough, consistent effort. I'm going to see how people's fitness really plays out into it. So this is the bridge we were talking about going over. It does get up to about 4-5%. Shouldn't be enough to drop anyone, but when you've just come out the sprint, your legs are still sore, and if someone attacks off the front, it can really cause you to struggle at the back. Because we go into a very sharp downhill, people want to stay tight, and you might lose a ride or two off the back if they're not paying attention, but generally it's going to be quite consistent. So one person just pushed a little off the front. The last thing you want to do through this section, so your speeds up to 63 kph in the group, the last thing you want to do is be off the front here. I'm not sure if this aero ride, HDR ride has purposefully done that, but you can see how quickly he's sinking through the group. So it's really hard to get your speed back up to those kind of levels, especially if you hit the front and drop down very quickly. The best thing you can really do is sprint hard to try and get back on the group and get your speed up, otherwise you can very easily end up dropped. See if just looks like one rider's struggling towards the back. Not sure who that is. I see Snow from WMZ, so his big effort earlier has hurt him. And when you start to go on those sections, especially on the kind of downhill, you've just got no chance of holding on. If you can't put a real big burst in to jump on and get your speed up to the 60s, which is what the main group was doing, then you're going to be absolutely gone in within seconds because of how quickly that speed is and the differential. I think on your own, people on the flats doing like 40 kilometers an hour, and so if the group's doing 60 odd, you're maybe doing 45 because of the downhill. There's just no way, and within seconds, you'll have lost a couple of seconds, like 50 odd meters on the road. So coming here, it's just a slight incline to begin with. Then we turn to some switchbacks. You might be able to see at the front of your map. So that's the first steeper section. It's a couple of minutes on the switchbacks of hard effort, and that's where we'll see the first lot of riders starting to get dropped. But as soon as you get through that, there are some rest sections where it's, 1%. There is a slight downhill at one point. But if you can keep up and do minimal work through this section, then you're in a good position come the KOM itself. Will be interesting is if anyone tries to push the pace. You on the Z-Stunner guys starting to struggle towards the back. We're only on 1-2% at the moment, so it's not too confident for him. Hopefully he's just getting position. Got caught out a little bit by the percentages. He's jumped back on well. But here we're going to start to go up. See the little downhill coming in. Fills you with a bit of confidence it's going to be okay, and then we go straight up into the 4-5-6%ers. Because there is a bit of rest before the KOM, it'd be interesting if anyone is willing to push. I think that's WMZ having a rider pushing through towards the front. And ideally you just want to sit in here, not do too much. And we're down to about 20 kilometers an hour, so there's very little draft benefit, but there is some. You will feel it very slightly. You'll just be able to sit in a bit easier, and mentally, if you can keep really close to someone ahead's wheel, you're going to do well. The last thing you want to do is be trailing towards the back. A lot of this climbing is mental. You want to be in a good position, feel like you're doing well. You notice a lot in TTTs, the person who's at the back, no matter how strong they are, will start to just open up a gap behind and just feel a bit weaker. Than it's very hard chasing on from the back, whereas the guys at the front, no matter how strong they actually are, will generally stay towards there for most of it. We've got one HDR rider up the road, doing a really nice job. So it's Nario from HDR Buccaneers, pushing 5 watts per kilo. Which is far above, if he can hold this for the entire section, he's far above the actual class that he's racing in. And we've got Oliveira from Dirt Prime, who are currently standing 6th, doing very well. He's not quite holding that gap, and I think he's just sinking off now. I don't know if he's targeting just trying to hold the HDR guy, just hold his wheel. But he's got a 2-second gap either side of him. He's a bit of no man's land. He wants to just keep working, but maybe ease off a bit and rejoin the group. Got another minute and a half, maybe 2 minutes of climbing. And then he's got some rest coming up. And at that point he'll want to be together. Nario's unlikely to stay away. And remember, FTS is a huge part. And the first minute or so of the KOM is totally draftable. So realistically, you don't want to be coming off the front. That's what I said earlier. It's important if you are trying to push the pace, you stay in contact. As soon as you're off the front, the group can just sit there. And you'll have to do significantly more work to get away. And it's going to be at your disadvantage for segments. If you're wanting to push the pace, you want to keep in contact, so it encourages people to move up and grab your wheel. Once you're a couple seconds off the front, people don't care. They forget about you, it's too much work. They're already hurting a lot. They're not going to want to do a lot more to jump across, possibly pointlessly. So you've got a nice group of WMC guys at the front. Clearly very strong as a team. Remember that, you see 5 of them already. I think there's another one a little bit further back. And only 4 of them are going to score. So importantly, they can push others down. So while only 4 riders score for your team, see there's the other WMZ guy. Only 4 riders score in your team overall standings, but all score individually. So if you take 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and then other riders who don't count get 5th, 6th, 7th, that means, the other teams that you're competing with can only get the points for 8th, 9th, and 10th. So it is significant if you can help push other teams down with your extra riders. And there is an advantage to having 8, even though 4 scores. So we have stretched out a bit. We've lost quite a few riders early on. We're on to the flattest section now with 2%. It's not actually flat, but it is a significant amount extra rest than it was before, especially in the draft. See them already dropping down to the low 3s. Well, some of them dropping down to low 3s. And are wanting to close up a little bit, especially on the breakaway rider. Most are just going to be chilling out a bit more through the section. So look who we've dropped so far. We've lost Miller, I believe is from Talking Dirty. I assume the team is slightly named after podcast put together by Dodd, the rider you saw dropped off earlier. Would strongly recommend checking it out. I think it's called the Talking Dirty podcast. Every week, just chats to other riders, talks about Zwift, talks about real life. Really interesting channel. So check that out if you get a chance. Get an interview with the man himself. You never know, he might invite you on there. So we've got Fremont dropped as well, so that's going to be a tough situation for Talking Dirty, having dropped a lot of their riders now. We saw Dodd go earlier, Peter going with him, and I've got a couple of them striding. See Jimbo, who was with Dirt Prime, who took a lot of the sprint points, has also been dropped through here. So they've got a nice little group. They're still going to do well, but that's going to be a lot of points lost at the finish for them. So it is really important they stick together through this section. And maybe, especially for these aero riders, who are kind of a secondary group, if they can bridge across that early group, it'll really help them. But they're already 8 seconds back. We've got this little bump here. This would be the time to try and move across, because there's a large flatter section coming up for the KOM. But again, they've been dropped. They're probably on their limit. It's very easy for me to say they need to do this. But when you're on your limit, there's very little you can do to keep working. See Red L doing very well, pushing 4 watts per kilo. And as we come into the steeper section here, you can see it looks like we're closing the gap, but actually it's staying fairly even. But it does give you that motivation. When you can see ahead, it looks like you're getting closer and closer. And realistically, you are able to, because you're on these steeper percentages. So they are able to jump this gap a lot quicker than anywhere else. But it's kind of just a bit of an effect of the incline that it looks like you're much closer. And in terms of time and effort needed to get across the gap, it's pretty similar. So yeah, these guys, 20-second gap to the front group. It's unlikely they're going to make it back now. See the front group just coming through that little dip that I talked about earlier, where there's a little downhill at the top of this segment. You can see they're up to minus 1%. There's a nice little relief after that hard section. People are breaking up this chase group, possibly trying to work hard to kind of bridge across, but that gap's way too big to make it to the front guys now. You can see that solo rider who was up the road from AHGR is just slowly being reeled in now. So they've done a lot of work to try and keep away. So it's going to be very brutal for them to feel and watch themselves get caught. That's one of the problems with this. You attack early and get caught, and you've just wasted so much effort pointlessly. It is a big risk. But, if it pays off, then it's worth every single watt of it, shall we say. But yeah, Oliveira, the guy who went for a breakaway, is currently a C on Zwift. So it was a very, very bold move to make. You'd like to see the people kind of going for those breakaways who are at the top end, especially those lighter riders on this climb. I think we have 1A with us. Carmen Rajkovic from Zedsona, who's 43 kilos. So she's got a 4.120 minutes, so this climb should very much suit. She's not a very punchy rider. But you see her at the front there. Very good timing from Zwift to show that up. But she'll be one of the favourites, I think, up this climb. Especially if she can kind of put in a big 5-minute effort and kind of break it apart, rather than letting people sit in until that last minute. When it gets onto that last minute, some people just have the ability just to push no matter how much they're hurting. And so she'll want to break it up early. See, she's at the front now. This isn't the time to really be at the front. As you see, the line for the start of the KOM's coming up. She'll want to be a bit further back. See, the group might stretch out a little bit here as some riders drop towards the back. See a couple of Seb and Toys, very experienced riders, said as the DS and manager of Beast Mode on the Premier Division teams. And so he, with all the experience, just sitting at the back and then using these flatter sections to move through. So over those riders at the front, he probably has a second or two advantage. So at the top of the climb, he doesn't need to overtake them. And it's a very mental thing on longer climbs. Lots of riders will just try to beat the rider behind them, especially going into the line. If they know, oh, we've got a 10-metre gap over them, they'll just ease off. When in reality now they can't do that because Seb's got such a significant advantage that they'll need to beat him by 30-odd metres. And it's very hard to push yourself when you know you're going to be first through the line. You know, you won't get the first across the line points, but that's going to be 2 points less over the rider ahead. For some positions, no points less. But if it's first versus second FTS, that's going to be an additional 10 points because this segment's doubled. But as we expected, Carmen from Zedson is now pushing the pace at the front. She's up to 5 there for a bit, and yep, consistently holding around 5 watts per kilo. With her numbers, I reckon 4.5 to 5 is probably maintainable up this climb for her, and there's going to be very few people in this pack who are also going to be able to maintain that. Just taking a look at Mulligan. So Mulligan's the current individual leader on points and part of the WMZ bouncers who are the team leaders. So it'll be important here if he wants to keep that individual lead that he gets good points up this climb. He's just holding a really nice position. So just take a look at downhill. He can't quite see the effect of the incline on Zwift. It's a bit deceptive. But it's going to be important for Mulligan as he comes up here just to maintain this good position. See, we've lost a couple more rides off the back. Does seem to be a little bit of a bunch forming here. And then a bit of a stretch out as a couple of rides. Drew Meyer dropping back, Chris Fitzer from Dirty Replacements. So that's more of second and third team just dropping back. You can see generally this front group's largely made up of individual riders now and a couple of the 4 of the WMZ riders. Is that 5? One more joining, so real dominance from the WMZ bouncers at the front of this group. Got a couple of Zedson rides as well though, which is good. Generally as a team they've been a bit lower down the standings. So it's really nice to see them kind of pushing on this week and doing well. Carmen seems to have dropped the pace a little bit here. So we've got a real steep section through the houses here. It goes up 10, I think it's up to 12% at one point. Maybe even higher. And so they really want to be doing quite a bit of work through this section. You really want to play it by the numbers. When it gets steeper, you push a bit harder. And when it's flatter, you just do a bit more rest. Because there's very little draft, obviously mentally being in the group plays into it, but you want to pace it as kind of sensibly as possible and as efficiently as possible. And already this front group has stretched out a bit. See Robbie Hack with a bit of a gap opening up. He's pushing hard here to try and jump back into that front group. So I'm up to 7 watts per kilo, which is very impressive in the middle of a climb. But see, people are spreading out now, and you know this climb is about your pacing. It's a long climb. And while it's important to still be in the group and have that mental thing of not seeing people too far up the road, you see Carmen's having this kind of probably a struggle mentally when she sees all these people ahead of her. But she has got the ability to push on and do well. And she wants to just be a little bit close now. Now up to 10% again. She wants to do the work. Trying to get 4 point... Yep, there we go. Up to the 4.7s, 4.8s. And see the rides ahead of her aren't quite doing that much. She will close the gap. But then the pace just a bit too varied. Looking towards the front. We've got Mulligan in second to the 2 of the WMZ guys, Leal and Mulligan, just significantly off the front, holding high 5s, mid 5s, which is very, very surprising for actual Bs. We've got Seb chasing them down behind for the Dirty Dancers. So generally the cutoff for Cat B to Cat A is around 5 watts per kilo for 5 minutes. If you can hold above 5 watts per kilo for 5 minutes, you're clearly a Cat A rider. If you're right on that boundary, you know, it can go either way, especially if you're stronger over longer distances or shorter distances. 5 minutes, I think, is around 80 to, well, probably maybe about 85% aerobic versus anaerobic. We see Leal comfortably holding 5 watts per kilo here. So it's, I mean, we say comfortably, it's up to 190. But this is a little S-bend section I was talking about. As soon as we hit around this section, we want to use this flatter bit to kind of build some speed up and attack through. But because it's so stretched out, there's not really a group to attack through. But it's this bit about 30 seconds to a minute to the finish from here. I want to see a really strong effort here to get away, but Leal's 11 seconds up the road. So a very big effort. Really strong. Hopefully he's improved a lot through this series. Otherwise maybe he wasn't quite in the right category to begin with. But really pushing on here. He'll take all the points, FTS and foul there. We've got Seb here doing really nicely with race against Mulligan. So we tie between the two of them. Remember, Seb's got a significant advantage from starting further back, so he'll get far more FTS points if he can keep with Mulligan. He doesn't have to necessarily pip him over the line, just needs to stay with him. So look further back, we are just broken up into little groups. We've got Yuan and Shaker for Zed Sunner and Dirt Prime. And David from Dirty Replacements, second place team. Just catching up slowly towards the front. Be a big lot of points for Dirty Replacements and might solidify their second place overall if they can. If David can push through here, especially if we can get second or third, coming through Seb and Mulligan. As we look further back, we've got a couple of an AHGR ride, and then we've got some more WMZ guys, 3 of them together in a row. But he's look on the mini-map to the top right, and it's all really split out. So just see Leal there with his 25-second gap over the top. Be interesting to see what he does here. With a 25-second gap, he could very much push and try and stay away if he wanted. It'd be a brutal way to finish the race, but he could get away with it. You see, he's dropped down to 0 and a bit watts per kilos. He's just waiting up here. Coming through the top, we've got Mulligan currently in first. It's just flatten out here. It's going to be really important. Who can push? So Seb's going for it. There we go. Seb's going to push through and take the second place first cross line. Definitely second place FTS. And then it looks like Mulligan might just have pipped David from Dirty Replacements there. So as you see on the left-hand side, you can see Seb was in second. And WMZ Mulligan just picked Dirty Replacements. David for the points. Still plenty of points for Dirty Replacements there. But it might, and Dean doing very well as well, but it might not solidify their second place yet. They'll have to do well at the finish too. So Robbie Hack coming through for WMZ in around 11th there. We've got a couple more riders from the Dirt teams in second and third here. We've got 2 from the Dirty Replacements chasing down Sizelov from Dirty, Talking Dirty. It's very stretched out, and what's going to matter here is who can form groups. We've got a little bit of a bigger group coming back together further back. We've got 3 or 4 riders, and see if this Aero guy can manage to push up to the other Dirt riders and his teammate. I think it's Graden up ahead. He's doing well. He's a lot of effort there. Really good to see him carry on pushing. You know, once we're past 10th, you don't get many points for this, but it's so important to get in a big bunch for the finish. Got a couple more. It's so stretched out here. When we come into the other divisions, especially with the B pluses and the A's, we'll see it'll be a bit more of a bunch through that section. But as we come down the categories, the lower numbers, the less impactful the flats are, but the more impactful the climbs are. So because the speeds are lower, there's far bigger differential on these climbs. So we see the front group going to be spread out a lot more depending on ability. So just jump back to the front. See, Leal's had his advantage really taken off. There is a super tuck section from the majority of this downhill. Got a group of 3 trying to chase down that's going to be a very tough position for them. So it's 3 chasing down a group of 5, I believe. And because of the numbers, unless there's someone very heavy in this group of 3, this gap's probably going to start opening up a little bit. They're fairly evenly matched on numbers. 3 to 5 isn't a massive difference. There's still enough people to cycle. 2 is a massive drop-off, and 1 is a huge drop-off on downhill. But 3 we're starting to get where we can regularly cycle who's at the front and who's in the draft. We've got a little bit of push out here on the flat section. Rider's not quite getting up for that. You can get away without doing it, but you see they've just lost a couple of seconds on that group ahead through there. They might keep that gap, but for that group of 3 chasing down, they really need to push towards the bottom. Just as it comes out the super tuck, they'll want to push really hard and try and maintain that speed. We will... double check, I'm not actually sure if we do go up the escalator. No, we don't go up the escalator yet, so they don't have that kind of benefit, but halfway down this climb there is a section where they really need to come out, and they might be able to close a bit of that gap. Otherwise it's going to be very tough for this group of 3 to get back in the points. See, I think they're 7th through to 9th, so they are going to get points, but if they can get into that front group, there's going to be far more available for them at the finish. And again, with nothing else to play for, we'll see whether this 5 when they catch up Leal, which shouldn't be too soon. See, they're doing 78 and he's down. He's on the climbs, but he's going to be at a lower speed. So on this downhill, it's very dangerous for losing rides because you hit high speed, so lighter rides are at a significant disadvantage. But importantly, you have this middle section where it gets up to 4 to 6%, and you really have to punch through this. You see a real difference between those riders who do punch through it and those who don't. See Leal having his 10-second gap as we went into this flatter section, just instantly wiped out there versus the group. And see a bigger gap opening up with these four, so they're doing about 4 to 5 watts per kilo, whereas the group ahead were doing 7 through that section. And they're also splitting up, which really isn't in their benefit. They really want to keep tight together through this, and it's hard to encourage people to work together, especially when they're in different competing teams. But it's really in their benefit if they can keep it tight and together. But as I was saying, it's interesting to see if this front group of 6 want to work at Box Hill and hold away. They've got a significant advantage over the rest of the field, which might mean them just want to sit in. None of them will want to do too much work. They'll want to recover. Because if one person goes up the road, there's going to be 5 chasing them on the downhill of Box Hill, and they're never going to stay away through that. They'll want to recover a bit for the sprint and kind of focus on that sprint finish. There's not a ton of points available, but every little will help, and they'll want that individual glory. Just looking back up the road, it's still quite spread out, just little bunches of 2 or 3 riders. And a bit further back, still, people have just been split apart by that little bump. It's the last thing any of them want. And they want to work hard over it, but you can't easily communicate between teams. If you could, you just really want to be talking about, keeping together over that bump. It's in everyone in this group's benefit if they can stay together, as they'll start to pick up riders ahead. So Carmen did manage to get over in a good group, so for good credit to her for managing to hold on after those early pushes up the climb. And especially on the downhill, you see she's having to work to get back on the downhill, because while it is super tuckable, she'll be super tucking at a lower speed than the heavier riders. Especially in C, we've got a lot more heavier riders, a lot of riders around the 80 to 90 kilos range. Whereas as we go up through the divisions, start to get lighter and lighter, as it's harder to kind of hit the watt per kilo numbers required for the higher categories. And especially when we get into A, there's very few riders above 90 kilos in A. I'm not sure there's any in A+, so that'd just be well, not any legit ones, shall we say, in A+. As above 90 kilos, it'd be just putting out stupid numbers, 450 watts, which you don't really see for riders in their garages at home. At least not without an e-bike. So just taking a look, this field is very, very spread out. Just focus a bit more on the front group and just see how they get on. But we've got a long little stretch of uphill through the kind of park, through Richmond Park, I believe they tried to describe this as. And then we're up to Box Hill. So it isn't particularly tough up this section. Obviously in a team time trial, everyone's pushing really hard, and this does have a big impact. You really notice it a lot more. But on a scratch race, no one's going to do too much work through here. You see around 2 watts per kilo, 2.5 on the front. In the pack, a lot less. Like, no one's going to get away, no one's going to do anything, so they're just sitting up. You can see the chase group behind, 3 riders, has managed to close the gap. There is a solitary rider, another about 15 to 17 seconds off that front group. It'll be interesting. So it's Dean from the Dirty Reps, from a day replacements. It'll be interesting to see if he can catch that front group. So one thing he's got to be cautious of here is he's currently on flats and then downhill. If he can manage to kind of get there early by pushing hard on these sections, he's going to be absolutely knackered from Box Hill. So if that front group wanted to, they could probably drop him. But equally, do they want to? Do they care that much? Do they want to tire themselves out? It's a tough position to be in. And he's got a 25-second gap over the people behind him. Probably say the better tactic here is just to sit up, do around 3 watts per kilo. I don't know how comfortable that's going to be for him. But, he wants to be working, but not really depleting his energy stores. All the way up to the climb, and then as soon as he hits the climb, going hard, especially early on, trying to bridge the gap to that lead group. Looks, yeah, as we're looking a bit behind, there are 2 WMC riders. I think they've just been caught up from what I saw earlier, because there was a group of 4, Hewd and Carmen, chasing down. So I think that'll be a nice big group of 6 riders. Again, the front group's also 6. It's going to be tough for them to bridge across on the climb. Box Hill, I'm not sure. I think it's another similar length effort through the segment itself. Obviously, you don't have that tough lead in first. I would presume it'll be around 8 minutes for the lower Bs. Maybe even slower, given there's not much for them to work on here. We've already split the field. It's not going to be massively in their benefit to work hard and try and break it up again. Unless one of these riders in the chase group's really trying to bridge across to the lead group. As we come further back, just small groups of 4 or 5 riders. Makes it really interesting seeing what happens going to the finish, if any of these groups work really hard to chase down. It's interesting that we have a lot of groups with riders together, with a couple of their own riders. And so with the 2 or 3 of the same team, you can possibly really think about working together, taking turns. But again, you're going to bring other riders back who are going to stay a lot fresher than you are. And yep, another group, got another WMZ rider here, but then 2 of the Talking Dirty riders. I'm talking about 26th here, so for them, if you know, it's every little place will count, and there isn't a huge drop off with the scoring as we showed earlier. I'm not sure. Might get up on the screen for you quickly again, just to show how the finish placings work. But it's not a humongous drop off, but it will start to add up. So we're looking at 26. That's 50 points compared to first at 100, and then moving up, just there are significantly more and more points. It's nothing like other competitions, but it will drop off and make an impact. So we've just got the lead group just starting to make it in. So it looks like we have had a couple more riders join up. Oh, it was just those 3, yep. So we're up to 9 now in this lead group. And Dean's now 20 seconds, so that gap it's eked a little bit more over the front group. But you can see them up in his vision now. It might help him push ahead, but they're doing 4 and a bit watts per kilo, 4.5. So they are working up here. It's Leal again. He did really well over the first climb. He's pushing the pace again up here. It really seems to be wanting to break it up. One thing on Box Hill, he might be able to stay away if the group behind splinters. But if the group behind stays together as an 8, then he's not going to be able to keep away on the downhill and into the finish. There is the opportunity for a breakaway up this climb. I think that's what he's going for. He's up to 5 watts per kilo here. It's not a chance he's actually a B- if he's holding this, but he's entered in racing, so what can we do? But there we go, so it has split up the group. So David from Dirty Replacements is trying to chase him down. At this point, I would just stick as a group. If I was kind of de-essing one of these teams, chasing him down, I'd just say don't bother chasing him. You know, he's clearly going to be able to put out more numbers. We saw that on the climb, being 30 seconds ahead on Leith Hill. You want to just stay as a group and kind of maintain a decent pace, hopefully above 4 watts per kilo. But just stick together as a bunch and then catch him easily on the downhill. There's no points available for the climb, so there's no real benefit to him pushing apart from for that breakaway. And so if you play into his hands, split up your chase group, then you're going to end up just getting like nothing on him, and you're going to end up trying to TT him down towards the finish line. Versus a chase group, you can work together, you have the speed advantage on the downhill, and that 12 seconds will evaporate so quickly. So we've lost a couple of riders. Pete from Dirty Works done really well holding on here, but he's just been dropped off now. You see Seb as well. So it's going to be tough. WMZ have lost another rider, but realistically they're comfortably ahead in the team standings now. So it's all about individual points at this stage. You see this Dean has managed to catch up a little bit on some of the guys dropping, but he's not pushed hard enough to really close the gap on the lead riders. And with that Leal attack, it's tough for him. He's in a horrible position. I think he's going to be solo for most of the way into the finish, unless he can pick up this rider from WMZ. So around that little hairpin, you have a little bit of rest, but from here on up, it's fairly consistent. It drops down to about 5-6%, but it's fairly consistent work. See, it's stretched out a little bit more. Leal's got his 20-second gap now. He's putting out silly numbers for the category. And Dave from Dirty Replacements is chasing down. He's going to get away a bit from this group. But if the group doesn't split up too much more, they will just catch on the downhill. So he's going to be in a bit of no man's land here. It really depends what happens behind, whether this group of currently Mulligan, Bane from AHGR Buccaneers, and Shaker from Zedson stick together. And especially if these guys, Seb and Pete K from Dirty Work, can manage to jump back on. Seb's doing 4 watts per kilo, which is just enough to get him back. If he can maintain closer to 4 all the way up, he'll easily jump back onto this group of 3 at the moment. I'm surprised to see none of them responding. I don't know if they're looking at the numbers at the bottom of the screen, they can see the gap, they can see Seb's closing the gap to them. And you'd like to think they'd just try and push away if they had anything left. See, Bane from HGR is trying to push away a little bit. All he has to do is just beat Seb's numbers, And it can be so demoralising to see as you're trying to chase. Just one person just putting out just a little bit more than you consistently, because you know they're going to get away. But again, if I Seb here, yeah, just as he has done, you want to just bridge across quickly now. You know, just jump straight across and then rest up. Alternatively, if you think you've got sink in the tank, push on, but ideally just rest up here. Maybe work to try and chase down Yuan from Dirt Prime ahead. And he seems to have a bit in the tank. He is able to carry on pushing and chasing down. That's it, when you get close to a group, you don't want to give them the opportunity, as I was talking to, just to match your numbers and just push off slightly. You want to just jump across quickly and just jump between these groups. So now it's all about just holding those numbers, just a little bit more than the guy from Dirty Prime up the road. If you can just beat his numbers by 0.1 all the time, you know, obviously they fluctuate a bit, but if you can beat those numbers, he will slowly reel him in. He's already got 3-second gaps. This group of 3 is really struggling now. It's 30 seconds to Leal up the road. It's unlikely they're going to manage to kind of catch him now, unless they can get, you know, a couple of the riders up the road, and maybe Pete from behind just joining on to get a group of 5 or so. I think 30 seconds might be too much to overcome. Not quite sure why Leal is in this category. I've just had a quick look at his ZwiftPower, and he has done 3.9 for 20 minutes. Sorry, 4.1 for 20 minutes recently, just a month ago. So I believe that should take him out of the category. So we'll see if his result stands here, especially his average for threes. His average 3 for 95% of 20 minutes is 3.72. And the category max is 3.59, but we'll see what happens. And he's clearly showing that he is significantly out of category with this performance. He's done 5.09 recently for 5 minutes, whereas you're expecting around, which is, you know, into the A numbers rather than the Bs. But we'll see. We expect more of the rides in this category to around 4.8 max, maybe more like 4.6 for 5 minutes. Possibly even lower. Not quite sure how it'll work out. Probably a bit lower, yeah, 4.5, 4.6-ish. He's got a significant advantage. He's making that tell really on this climb. Absolutely flying away from the rest of the field. That group of 3 has stayed together nicely, but Seb's managed to get up the road. He's jumping onto the Dirty Prime ride, and together they might be able to do a bit of damage, maybe catching up to David from Dirty Replacements in third. Who's currently in second. It'll be interesting if this group of 3 manages to catch them up as well. If they can get together as a 5, then Leal will be at risk in first. But currently he's got 15 seconds over second place, 30 seconds over third and fourth. And comfortably takes the lead up the climb. One horrible thing about Box Hill is you've just finished this horrid 7-8 minute climb. And then just ahead, you might not be able to see on the minimap yet, but you have another punch. We've got another little section of climb to do. See David coming through the line in second place. Remember, there aren't any points for this segment, but it's always nice to do well up here. See, Seb has caught up Dirty Prime rider. So whether they'll work together. I think they have comms, so all the Dirt teams have their own Discord channel, so they keep separate, don't communicate. It'll be interesting if they manage to kind of roughly take it in turns and chase down ahead. And you see the riders at the front now just pushing up. You see Leal's up onto this incline. And it's just horrid. You're absolutely on your limit. You've just started to recover, and then you have to punch up again. There is a nice downhill at the top, but you know, if you don't hold on to people and you get dropped by a group over this, then it's race over. Just look, they've now got a group of 4. I think they've picked up another. I'm not sure who they've picked up. I think it's another WMZ rider who must have managed to push up a bit. And they managed to catch up Seb. So they have worked hard. So there is a chase group of 6 now, which might make it very interesting going into the finish. Suspect they'll catch David from Dirty Replacements. So whether they'll catch Leal with his big advantage. Unfortunately, Pete from Dirty Work didn't quite manage to make it across. A bit further back, we have a nice little bunch that's formed. I think we've got a couple of riders from WMZ in there as well, and then 3 from Dirty Replacements. It's going to be a strong finish position points for Dirty Replacements if they can all hold on. And going back, we've got a lot more individual rides as we go further back. It's not going to be in their benefit if they on the downhill, unless they can group together. Just take a look. So I think Dirty Replacement's probably comfortably in second. Especially with the finish points, how they look, with a lot of riders inside the top 20. I think they've got 3 or... Well, with I think David up the road, they'll have 4 riders inside the top 20 for Dirty Replacements. They should have that gap open over Aero and Talking Dirty. They'll be close between Talking Dirty and Aero for 3rd place on the podium as a team. So it has split up a little bit with this chase group. Probably should have kept an eye on them. Got Mulligan and Bain, who have pushed off. Well, presumably they went very hard over the little ramp at the end. But again, 4 riders comfortably going to catch up to. As I said, 2 and 1, there's significant gaps in time on a downhill. As soon as you get to 3 and above, generally, you know, there's a couple of seconds in it for every extra rider, but the gap isn't quite so big. See all of them just sitting, doing nothing, getting full recovery and chasing down. Leal's still got a 30-second gap, so that kind of attack, whether that was a planned move from WMZ to kind of break up the group, I suspect it was. I'd be surprised if it was, especially as they didn't both go. Whether that gap will help, and having made it to 4, it might be enough just to keep Leal away, but I suspect David will now be caught with 7-second gap. He's unlikely to keep that, especially with the speed they'll take into the escalator. And this chase group a minute behind, they're not going to make it back up, but it should be a good finish between them. So you see Leal doing really well there. Just as he comes out the kind of super tuck, he's pushing hard. You've essentially got a bit of essential free speed as you hold the numbers. You want to push hard, try and maintain that kind of additional speed over what you'd normally hold at those numbers on the flats. Just hold it for a little bit longer. And then just try and just settle into a rhythm. Once you get down to about 45, it'll be for these guys, because individually you'll probably hold about 40. You'll just want to get into a rhythm and maintain. It's not far to go to the finish. Finished at 40.9, so he's 1.5 pardon me, 1.5 kilometers away from it. So you'll know it's, you know, it's going to be 2-3 minutes work for him, especially if you include the escalator that's coming up soon. He should be confident of holding that 20-second gap. And again, a lot of it will depend on what he can do at the escalator here, and how well that group's going to be carrying a lot more speed on that downhill than he is. So they're doing about 42. He's down. Well, that's not quite fair as he's going up an incline. But this is going to be quite a crucial section. See what you can do up here. You really want to treat this as a sprint up here. You get up to 15%. And he should be sprinting up here. He doesn't have much left. It's much lower than we'd like to see. He's 5.5. I know he's working hard, but it's where this group will have a lot more energy and be able to chase up a big gap. He's doing well here. He's pushing up. He needs to keep working. He's dropped down already. He's at 20 kilometers now. He needs to be pushing hard here. I know he's hurting, but he's got to get that speed up. It's far more important. He does a lot of work now, then settles into a lower base pace for the rest. See the chase group, Seb, etc., 7 watts per kilo. They're holding 30 still all the way up here. Now, he's got a big gap, but they're starting to really eke into it. Got a lot of them doing red numbers as well here, just pushing through. Have we lost? We've lost maybe David from Dirty Placement, so he's done all that work up the climb and he's now dropped. Very tough on him in 8th place. But that's going to be his position for the end of the race. He shouldn't make that gap back up to the group. We're down to sub 20-second advantage for Leal. I suspect he will manage to hold this now. None of them are really interested in the chase, it seems. A couple of them pushing a bit. Shaker went up to 6, but he's just hitting the front, chilling again. And with 2 WMC riders in this group, they're not going to do any work to chase down Leal. So just going to keep on him and focus on him while he takes his victory parade, shall we say, at this point. 20-second gap. So with my understanding, he is in B because he falls under the pure watts limit. Thank you very much for Doug for explaining that. So there's a pure watt limit of 225. And so because he's under that, because he's a lightweight rider, he's able to stay in this category despite his significant, very like Carmen, as I was talking about earlier. So he's taken advantage of his kind of being a lightweight rider, being strong on the climbs, and absolutely executed perfectly, just as I was suggesting that Carmen tries to do. Making big distance on the climb, then just trying to hold that gap. Otherwise, so fair play. This 20-second gap will definitely hold as he takes it in. There's a little bit of a kicker here as we come out over the bridge and see no one really doing too much damage. Everyone seems to just be sitting in for the finish now in this group. So just watch Lille coming through to take the win. So seeing this company there, we'll just watch the early attack. So Seb's gone very, very early here. He's not going to be able to hold these numbers all the way to the finish. And he's got a couple of mulligan. So the current individual leader, if he takes the win here, he should win overall. If the individual rider standard, he's not quite, he's just dropped off. He's not quite able to get through Seb. And it's going to be RUN from Dirty Prime, just takes second place over Seb. Then mulligan. Got Shaker and then Bane, then Shaker for HDR coming through. So really tight finish there. Very early attack from Seb, just spreading out the group. But again, people managed to get on his wheel. When you make those attacks, you've got to break away. If you don't break away within and get to that 5-meter gap in the first few seconds of making a long attack, I'd suggest you just ease off, just let it go, reset, go again. Because that when people have sat on your wheel, as you saw there, you're doing 9 watts per kilo, they can do 7 or so and still hold you. Even though it is a bit bumpy here, it means they have to do a bit more work. But ideally for Seb, once he'd got a gap over, when it's just 3 riders essentially in his group, you probably want to sit back a bit and then punch through. See Dean trying to chase down Chris Fitzia, both from dirty replacements. Not quite making it, and then a couple more coming through later. A couple of WMZ riders just easing through the line, don't need to do too much, comfortable in their position. And then dirty replacements, plenty of points here, so they should comfortably take second overall. But as I said, WMZ bouncers, really big credit. They'll have 99 points out of possible 100 in the team standing. Lille taking the individual win today, and Stephen Mulligan taking the overall first place for the competition, I believe. Bane did well as well today for AHDR Buccaneers, so he might take second individually. Big credits to WMZ. Textbook move from Lille to take the win. Come back, we see all the groups just split up. A lot of people going for this longer attack then. Seeing the attack Jimbo, who took loads of the points on the sprints. He's gone early, he's managing just to hold it. See the gap just opened up significantly over those behind. It's one of his teammates from Dirt Prime. He's chasing him down. You'd hope he wouldn't do too much unless he really wants to beat him and knows he can bridge. But he's currently leading out the Aero Guard guy. I think that's fairly comfortable for Jimbo taking them with that early punch. And yeah, Oliveira just beating out Ares Brewer. Another 2 riders coming in. I always enjoy watching the 2 or 3 rider groups, seeing what happens. Looks like they're both just sitting in. Should really see him kicking. So Aero, the guy who's leading out, is having to kick really hard. He's just able to put out a significant amount more than the HDR rider, which is enough for him to take the win out of the 2 of them. It's a very tough position to be in the front of a 2 rider group. You have a couple of options. Personally, I'd suggest just easing off, let the other rider go through, and then kicking hard. But one of the problems with doing that is if you can't then grab their wheel instantly, if they instantly sprint through and you don't jump on, then they're gone. There's no way you're moving backwards, you're at lower speed and they've just benefited from your draft. So you have to time it just right. See, here's very interesting, a lot of little repeated punches, but Miller's gone all in here. Got Grozdanov from WMZ, might be able to hold his wheel. It's going to be tough for Miller here, who went 12 watts per kilo for a bit, but he's got that gap open to above 5 meters. Should be comfortable now if Miller can just hold it up. Myers pushing quite hard. Is he going to come through? He needs to go again. He needs to kick again if he wants to catch up. He needs to kick early. He left it too late. He's going to catch him on the line. Keep pushing Drukon. Oh, doesn't quite catch him on the line. But there we had Keith Miller just leading out, which made it comfortable enough. While the chase rider couldn't quite do the same numbers, hold that gap, he had enough of a pull out from Keith that he was able to hold off Drew. So we've got one of the Aero riders chasing down Fremont from Talking Dirty. A lot of the Talking Dirty riders just coming in around 30th, lower 20s. Yeah, it's comfortable, no need to push there. No one's very much wanting to chase down the gap. I think everyone's tired. And, you know, you've done a lot of work, you're fighting over a point or 2. Most of the standings are already decided. I would always recommend just pushing. I've seen so many situations in other race series where it's been 1 point between teams in the weekly team standings, and that's, you know, made the difference overall. I think there was once, I think it was season 3 when Dirty Sprockets won overall in the playoffs, And in the league, in the APAC division, AHDR actually beat them and came first in the league. There were 2, maybe even 3 races that series where the 2 teams were separated by 1 point, even occasionally finish on the exact same number of points on individual races, and that league all came down to that. So while, you know, you might be down in 38th place as we look at Snow, who'd attacked really well early on, but just, I think, got too tired, did too much work too early, and couldn't quite hold the front group up the climb. You know, he might be down 38th, but he's been chased down, and that extra point for Dirt might make the difference in some of the places. It might take him from, especially with Dirty Prime and Dirty Work, very close in 6th and 7th overall. But, you know, one match point might make the difference, especially with such a tight standing each week. We've been very close on point scoring. You know, WMZ have been quite far off the lead, but overall, between 2nd and 4th, it's 3 points. You know, that could be 1 point in 1 race, could make the difference there. Just coming through the field, see a lot of riders spread out, so as I was saying, as we get to slower speeds up the climb, especially when we're going down whole categories, when we're talking A to B, B to C, it gets more and more separated out. But even just within the categories we go down, the further back we go, the fewer groups we find as you're going at slower speeds, and so that extra 0.1 watt per kilo makes a bigger difference in speed up the climb. And so the further back we go, the more spread out people are. It's also compounded by the fact that, you know, if you stay in the lead group for longer, then, you know, that spreads out. The earlier you drop off the lead group, the bigger significant difference you're going to have in places and overall time. We'll just stick through some of the rides, see if there's any kind of 5 second gap here between McNabb of Dirty Work and Moore of Zedsoner. So Zedson seem to have had a really good day today. They've not been doing particularly well in the overall team standings, but they've had a really good day out today. Hopefully that might boost them up a bit, give them confidence going into the next season. We see McNabb just coming through. Oh, that's brutal on Moore of Zedsoner. Both doing lots of work, but McNabb just had the momentum. He had the speed advantage coming into it. And so over that last few seconds, it didn't make too much difference in what either of them did. He was just coming through too hot for any kind of reaction from the Zedsoner rider. What's really nice to see is that lots of teams, now I'm not looking at them now, but if you look at WMZ, they've gone for different kits, and I think it's really important. While, you know, sometimes it isn't specified in rules, but if you have multiple teams entering a competition, I think it's really nice and important that each team's in a different kit. I mean, for commentary it helps massively, but for actual riders, you know, if you're looking out for your opposition, I mean, I think WMZ have used about 10 different riders, maybe even more, in this competition. And so sometimes, you know, their opposition won't quite know which team they're on. They might change between the teams, but, you know, if they're in a certain kit, it's the easy way to identify. See Filthy from HDR going very hard there. But if you look, he's only got a 4 meter gap. It's not been quite enough. So while he pushed 10 watts per kilo for a few seconds there, Fryer's able to take advantage of the draft. He might not come through. He couldn't quite put out the numbers. He is gaining, though. But yeah, Filthy manages to just stay away. But given the numbers he was doing, he should have been much more comfortably ahead. But he didn't quite break that 5 meter gap before easing off the first time, and that just left the opposition just a bit of a sniff of coming in. He didn't quite get through. He was about 2 watts per kilo down the entire time. But, you know, normally 2 watts per kilo, if there was a bigger than 5 meter gap, that first rider would be flying off. But because the second was just able to benefit the draft, even at the lower speeds, because we've got this incline, he almost came through and pipped him at the end there. So we just go through the rest of the field. I think it's going to be quite stretched out. I can't see much happening into the finish. Just go through them, see how they're getting on. So P2 dropped back to try and help Dodd out, presumably, or just got dropped, not actually sure which. I like to think he dropped back to help his teammate out. It's a much nicer way to go about it. But he's coming in. He had a tough old race after that. Once you drop from that lead group, it's so hard. The difference in speed between a big group of 50-odd riders and, you know, a couple is massive. I've seen quite often when you look at segments, possibly if you have Strava and you can see the segments, you know, it's on group rides, I'm going quicker than I necessarily do on a team time trial, just because it's so much, like, the benefit is just so big. While on team time trial, you know, you're going to be pushing almost at your limit, whereas in a group ride you might be zone 2 usually. But the difference with having the sheer numbers that you get in some of them will make for a much, much faster time. while you're back here, the last thing you want to see, you've just gone over 2 big climbs, then you come up to the elevator. It's absolutely demoralising. We'll see if Lee wants to push up here. We'll not blame him in the slightest he doesn't, but there's such a big difference in speed if you are able to push really hard up this escalator. He's coming in at 33, 34 kilometers an hour, 35. Does push up. Well, big credit, Lee. Really well done. He's managing to hold up to 20, 19, 18. Just got to keep working. You want to keep it going, keep that momentum. He gets over about 15. So you saw the lead guys in a group who were sprinting over there up to 19 kilometers an hour over the at the top of the escalator. So it's not a big drop off there for Lee. Big credit. See if Barnes does the same. I don't know if he's trying to chase down Lee, but see, here we go. So he's not going quite as hard over. He's still pushing though. Big credit to him. Still pushing, working hard. But he's down to 15 here, 14 here already, 13. That is a huge difference in time up there. 11 kilometers now at the top. Yeah, he's going to have lost another couple of seconds over Lee just on that second. I think it's 4 seconds he lost over Lee over the escalator. Like 4 seconds anywhere else is a massive gap to do. You have to put a lot of work there. So over the escalator you can lose 15 seconds very quickly if you're not pushing versus someone who is pushing. We saw there with Lee and Barnes, both were pushing, but not quite early enough for Lee, and it cost him 4 seconds. It's such an important feature, especially on team time trials. So here we see Dodd, who had his dropout earlier. Absolutely brutal, and the work he did to try and chase on probably just put him way over his threshold and limit, and he suffered as such on the climbs. Good credit. He's not going to be scoring for his team here. Might have, unless he got a lot of points on the sprint, which I don't think, from what I saw, he didn't get a ton. Not enough to make up what will be about 60-odd point deficit at the finish over some of his teammates, but it's good to see him just keeping on going to the finish. Always like to see, if you get dropped on team trials, just keep working it. Don't stop when you get dropped from the group. Just keep going, maybe gently. Although if you're the 5th rider, you never know if you're going to have a dropout ahead. We saw that last week in the team I was helping out in the Cat A division, where we had our 4th rider had a dropout before the line. That cost us 30-40 seconds. It might have cost us the entire competition, going from 1st to 2nd overall. I'm not sure what the results were today so far, but that cost us. Whereas if our 5th rider had been pushing a lot harder. To be fair, our 5th rider was pushing hard and did really well towards finish, but if they'd been a bit tighter, maybe we would have done well, especially if the drop had been permanently. Thankfully, the guy who dropped out managed to get it back together and time trial into the finish by himself. But that 5th rider is important to keep going. After that, though, you want to see riders just finish out the course, even if it's at 2 watts per kilo, 1 watt per kilo, coming back an hour later and doing it. It's good to see him just getting through it. You see Billy Davis from Zedson starting to chase down Dodd. Be interesting to see if they try and have a little competition into the finish. Yeah, it's absolutely brutal when you do have a dropout. Oops, daisy. So Davis is doing a little bit more than Dodd, but that gap to 12 seconds is going to be very tough over what is 0.8 kilometers to go to the finish. I'm saying you can take maybe 3-4 seconds over a kilometer. The finish is a bit different because you have, especially if in a group, when you have a big sprint finish. But anything more than 4 seconds a kilometer is just an unrealistic gap to chase down, especially when it's big. When it's when you're looking at 20 seconds over 5 kilometers, you have to chase down. So there's exceptions, like if you're on Alp to Zwift and it's taking you a good 4 or 5 minutes to do each kilometer. But generally speaking, 4 seconds I think is just, that's my cut-off when I think there's just no point chasing. So he is slowly gaining on Dodd, but I think Dodd's more than experienced enough. So he has just moved up in the past I think the past 4 months or so, moving up to Cat B. It's a big credit to him just sticking it out. It's been a tough day out for him. But he's doing very well. I think they competed. He had a team of a couple of riders, so a couple of his teammates have also moved up and they competed in the ZRL together. In Cat B, which is nice to see. One of the nice things is with the lower divisions you can be a bit more competitive. In Div 1, if you're anything below 3.8, in Cat B shall we say, anything below 3.8 for 20 minutes and you're going to get dropped so quickly. But in those lower divs it does drop down, 3.5. I think even in one we had I think it was Northeast, we had a team with a lot of rides around 3.5, in the first few weeks, we started off and they were getting dropped instantly. By the last week, we had over half our riders managed to maintain in the front group for most of the race, which is fantastic to see. But it does vary division to division and region to region. But it's good to see those riders right on the boundary, 3.3, 3.4, 3.5 for 20 minutes, pushing on and competing in Cat B. Especially these higher-end races where it's such stacked fields. Obviously, Dodds just managed to keep it away there, 7 seconds. He's going to comfortably stay away then there. So once these two are through the line, just go back and just have a reminder of the overall standings. I think things are going to generally stay the same, so it'll be WMZ Bouncers in first overall, Dirty Replacements in second, and I think Talking Dirty will probably hold their ground over Aero Guard, taking third, Aero Guard in fourth, and AHDR Buccaneers in fifth. Though AHDR Buccaneers did do well, but there's three-point gap up to Aero Guard going into this round. I doubt they'll manage to come through there, even though they had a good performance today. So we'll just get that on screen for you now before we end the stream. At least I'll try to. I think, there we go. Slightly slower on the slide than normal, with everyone suddenly trying to check the results. Just get up for you. So this is the results not including this week so far. So you see there's a big gap to WMZ Bounce, who comfortably won today, and Dirty Placements, Talking Dirty, Aero Guard, and then AJHR Buccaneers, I think all will maintain their positions in that order going into the final standings. So big credit to everyone this week. Saw Zedsoner had a really big performance this week. They might have improved. I think they could have caught up WMZ BB's bid. 4 points is a big gap, but one decent performance, especially on TTTs where there's such close margins. You can easily make that swing. We'll see if they've done it today. But big credit to everyone who's taken part in this series. Thank you very much for joining us. The next season will hopefully be announced very, very soon if it hasn't already.